I think we can all agree. Vince McMahon, whatever you want to say about him, like business acumen, all that kind of stuff, he's done a lot. He's accomplished a lot. He was over the line in many ways in his business. And I think no better thing outlines that in this documentary than the treating of the moment of Owen Hart's death, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and the way that Vince was even talking about it to this day, where he said, you know, Bret Hart wants to talk about, oh, if it was Shane splatter on the floor, I wouldn't let the show go on. And he said, I would. If it was me, I would want the show to go on.
I believe him.
Oh, no,
but it wasn't him, though.
I don't believe him. It's not for a second I don't believe him. I believe that would happen under Vince McMahon, but but it's one of those things where even like to this day, like it's not good PR, it's not good business at the end of the day, because like think about the effect that it had and how much blowback WWE got for it at the time. Like it was not like a small story. This was one of the few things that broke through to the mainstream. And again, like having people wrestle, like people like Jeff Jarrett, who's like Owen Hart's best friend, cutting a promo about puppies right after his best friend is wheeled out past him, cold, dead. Like that is, in my view, that's not inspiring like confidence or whatever in your wrestlers or in your business. It's not like, you know, savvy business. It's just greed.
And you're literally telling them like you don't exist. You're not even a number. You don't matter at all. Like one of your wrestlers just died. The blood, I forgot about this detail. The documentary reminded me. His blood was literally still splattered around there, and like The Rock was doing moves around it. People were just like, it was insane. The fact that it's still there and they're going on with the show. I think with social media and the way everything is today, I don't think it would have continued. I don't think the show would have continued if something like that happened. You know, like this year. But
you got to think about it. I mean, this was a tragic moment, and they were living in this tragic moment in the moment. So he had to make a call. I mean, as the boss, all of these people in this arena bought their tickets. They came to see a show. What do we do right now? This is something we never imagined or thought would happen. You got to make a decision on the moment, and I can't fault that man for the decision he made with his business. At the end of the day, I mean, I was watching on pay-per-view that night. If the show ended, I mean, I wouldn't have been happy. But obviously, I didn't know what was going on either. But you know what? It was a tough decision to make in the moment, and he made the decision he made. You know, these days, if they did continue, of course, they'd go clean the blood up out of the ring. But I mean, I'm sure it was a tough night for everybody, man. So I mean, I can't put that on him for making the show continue, because you got to make a decision.
That show would not continue in 2024. It just would not.
Absolutely not. You're also not going to see puppies on the pay-per-view in 2024. It was a different time.
But like I think the bigger issue that people had was like, okay, you can buy it. That like, in the moment, very difficult decision. You don't know what to do. There's so much happening. Like, you know, whatever. I disagree with like the decision at the end of the day, but I can see that point.
Yeah,
I can understand that. But to now, whenever this interview happened, I think it was in 2022, to defend that decision as vehemently as Vince McMahon did, as good business, I think is just, it speaks to the obsession, like I mentioned earlier, that Vince had with this idea of business, right? With this idea of you know, growing. And there's like a line towards the end where he says, where he's asked about like his retirement, you know, what's his plan for retirement or whatever. And this is pre, you know, the June 2022 thing. And he said like almost verbatim, I don't believe in retirement. You know, if you stop growing, you die. Like something along the lines of that. And like, that's what he believes in. Like it's that like obsession that kind of helped him grow WWE and kill the territories, do all the stuff there. But it's also what is responsible, you could argue, for his downfall. It's what you could argue is responsible for the perception that many fans have of him outside of even the scandals. It's responsible for the people whose lives Vince McMahon has impacted in a negative way throughout the years. And again, it's like, I still think that there's like still different aspects of Vince that could have been explored in this documentary just as like a viewer. But at the same time, I thought this is as good as a glimpse we're ever going to get into like kind of what makes Vince McMahon tick. Because at the end of the day, he's only going to give us what he's going to give us.
But you got to think about it. That's a glimpse into the billionaire mindset. If you want to retire, go die. I mean, I'm not mad at him for saying that. That's his bro. I mean, he's a businessman. You know, he has that crazy work ethic. I want to retire. I don't want to work at my job right now. But you know what? He's a man who's like almost, if not 80 years old, and he still wants to put the work in. So I can't, bash him for that. But another thing I will say is with the Owen Hart, before we get too far away from that, it was proven, because people were saying this was Vince's fault. He meant to do it, this and that. It was proven that it was not his fault. They said it was a manufacturer error for whatever.
Well, okay.
And Bret Hart forgave him for it. So, I mean, I think that is very important to note.
Okay, Bret Hart forgave him for it. Martha Hart hasn't. Okay. I don't want to belabor the point too hard here, because it is. I think people can go watch the stuff for themselves. But the thing with the manufacturer and like this being an accident was, no one is saying that Vince McMahon deliberately murdered Owen Hart that night.
Some people were.
Well, those people aren't serious. Even Bret, when he said it, he's like, yeah, wasn't serious like that. But
he was serious.
Bret Hart was
serious.
What WWE,
what
WWE and Vince McMahon are guilty of is knowingly putting a team of people there to do that stunt, who like they knew at the time that it was dangerous. Like they tried to get like another team basically to do the stunt.
Wrestling is dangerous.
Kenny, let me finish.
The team had a shady reputation. Is that what you're saying? Like the team had a shady reputation, but WWE still went ahead with them.
There was a team that they had traditionally used that WWE didn't use for this stunt because that team told them it's too dangerous. So they got basically a shadier team to come in and do it, and the results were what they were. It's true. It is true. Yeah, like, you don't believe me, bro? Go read.
Well, I mean, you could say it was a dangerous stunt for sure, but I mean, Sting does it all the time. They just did it in AEW.
No, yes, what he's arguing is that like it is dangerous, but WWE knew that this shady team could cause problems, but they didn't care because like the other guy's not gonna do it. Then let's hire these guys. No problem. Who cares about the safety? So I can see that argument.
If this was a legitimate business, how can we say WWE knew they were shady?
They weren't a legitimate business. What do you mean? This business was the one that went out of business.
Like, yeah, you guys, come on and do it.
Come on, you want to talk about shady manufacturing? Okay, all that aside,
and it was confirmed in the court of law. They said it was a manufacturer defect, so it wasn't anything.
Wrong. No one is arguing against that, Kenneth. No one is arguing against that.
Okay, I'm just saying.
Like,
it wasn't Vince McMahon's fault.
Do check out the Dark Side of the Ring about Owen Hart's death. They go into great detail about that specific part of it. The other thing is like that show probably should have been stopped anyway, and like you can also put a lot of blame on the police department there. That was someone just died. And there were witnesses there, and at the time you don't know what happened. Like genuinely, you don't know what happened. Like you don't know whether someone was pushed. You don't know that show should have been stopped regardless. It should not have been in Vince McMahon's hands. Like it is also like a point that I think we need to get into, because at the end of the day, you can't let the billionaire whose incentive is to keep on like putting on the show regardless of that, because you don't know what happened. Like was he put like obviously he wasn't, but like we at that point it's the police's job to like close everything off.
Crime scene.
It's a crime scene. It is a crime scene.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, I agree with your earlier point, Kenny, regardless of what happened. Yeah, and that's a really good point by you, Big Ohm. But like my gripe is, how you talked about Jeff Jarrett cutting that promo about puppies and stuff? Like, why couldn't they rewrite the show a little bit and make it more serious and make sure that this thing happened, at least, pivot according to that? Because like we all know the stories. They rewrite the show 1 millisecond before it starts. Raw was like rewritten millions of times, especially when Mr. McMahon was there. So like, if anything, I can be definitely mad at, it's that like we already knew at that point Owen Hart passed away. And what are you doing with the puppies from a like pivot?
Deborah was like
too chaotic, I'm sure, man. It was too chaotic.
Deborah was in tears as they wheeled Owen Hart's body like past them. And then people were telling her to go. Like that is insane.
She's like, I'm praying for you too. And still had to do the promo segment. It was tough. But I mean, puppies wasn't like crazy back then. This is just a thing they do. Just normal. Like, hey guys, it's just normal promo. Today, looking at it, it was crazy, but back then, I mean, bro, we wanted to see the puppies.
It was just, a weird circumstance and like bad time, bad place. But fellas, what's your final thoughts on this documentary before we get out of here?
It's a lot to dive into, man. I mean, it's still a lot we didn't touch on. I loved it. Personally, I sat down here. I went to the gym to work out. I was watching on the iPad, and I said, I'm not stopping watching this. I had to do some content when I got home. I threw it up on a separate stream and let it run. I thought it was entertaining throughout.
Agreed. It's a nicely produced documentary. I can agree with that. But what about you, Biko?
Yeah. I mean, my circumstances were different. I was on a hike when I was watching this. I was partially listening to this as like a podcast, partially watching this in between breaks. Overall, I mean, I think, again, this is like probably the best insight we're going to get into Vince McMahon and kind of what makes him tick. I think what I'm interested to see is like if there is going to ever be like a groundswell for them to release more footage, because there were like hundreds of hours of interviews done for this. Like, and Vince McMahon like sat down for extensive periods of time to film this. It wasn't just like 1 or 2 sessions. This was like months long of Vince sitting down every night and like being interviewed and them trying to pry for information. And one thing that is interesting, if you guys want to go check it out, Bill Simmons, who produced this with David Shoemaker, did a podcast where he was discussing like how Vince like kind of operates, and basically like they would have like a set recording time. It would be like something like, like 5 p.m. or whatever, and like they'd be waiting there and it keep getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back, and then at 11 p.m. Vince would kind of roll up with his posse and like Paul Heyman, a couple of other people, Bruce Pritchard, others, and like he would come in, he would get into the suit that he needed to for the shoot, because they have like one suit, like that's why he's always wearing the same thing. It's like they have like one suit that he always wears whenever they shoot, regardless of what day it is. So, and then like by the time they would get started, do the makeup and everything, it would be like midnight, and they would just have to film for like as long as they could. And like in the middle of it, like people would be like interrupting Vince, kind of reminding him of like, falsehoods or truths or whatever. Like there's this one part in the docuseries that actually like does this, where Vince is asked about Sable and like this storyline where he had like an affair with Sable, and he was getting it confused with the harassment like lawsuit that Sable had levied against him and Vince McMahon in the 90s. And Paul Heyman just like, you can hear off screen go, storyline, and he's like, oh yeah. So I mean, look, Vince McMahon is a very flawed and in my view disgusting human being. However, one thing that is true about society is we love to see how people tick. We love to see what's going on in their brains, and this was, I think, as good as a dissection that we're ever going to get of Vince McMahon, in his own words, especially.
No, you're
Big
right.
Om,
You're right.
We are all flawed. You calling that man disgusting? That is your perspective. That's your opinion.
That is my perspective.
I don't know what this man has done in his personal life, but I want to see a Vince McMahon movie after this. In fact, give me a threequel.
I hope
Make
it's
it in
not
3
too
parts.
realistic,
Early,
man.
mid, end.
I mean, sure, hopefully. But you see, I don't like that, because it's going to be fake and it's going to be him promoting again. I want to see the real
it's
Vince
going to be
McMahon there.
WWE. It's going to be WWE produced through WWE Studios.
No, WWE produced it. No.
What is it? What's their movie?
Cody Rhodes playing Vince? That would be crazy.
Yeah, well, my final take on it is Tony Atlas is my new favorite person after the documentary. That's
hilarious, man.
Yeah.
You grabbed my peckle. My peckle.
Your what? Yeah.
My peckle.
Yeah, it was. That's it.